Welcome to Is This for Kids? Jonathan Beard Blevins here, dad of 3, and I think that media is pretty trashy, especially the media marketed towards children.
And I'm Katie, MrsRuvi, and I think you can redeem most of the media that's marketed to children, but our goal with this podcast is to help parents to be able to shield their kids from things that they find inappropriate in content, to be able to shepherd them through the kinds of things that they're never going to be able to avoid, and to really share in media because it's a huge influential topic for kids. If you're hanging out, just hit that subscribe button. Give us a little thumbs up on this video, right?
Thumbs up. Today we're going to talk about a very famous All-American Rejects song, It Ends Tonight.
This is us.
It ends with us.
It ends with us.
Just a little insight doesn't make abuse right. This is like The Notebook, except with
Not
like
at all.
2 more abuse scenes.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, he really wasn't great in The Notebook. Neither of them were.
Okay, I was making more of a comment on how this was really kind of a...
Let's give a quick scenario or synopsis of It Ends
Scenario
With
works,
Us.
yeah.
For anybody who's never read the book or watched the movie.
You've done both. I've only done one.
So for this podcast, we are going to kind of do a little bit of book and movie at the same time. I'll kind of let you know where the differences are. They're not huge differences book to movie. They're like the book is longer, obviously, so there's times where one of the characters goes to England that's not present in the movie. That's kind of
character goes to England.
Ryle during the pregnancy. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
Anyway, yada, yada, yada. It's based on a Colleen Hoover novel of the same name, and it follows Lily Bloom, the main character in the movie. She's been aged up from the book. So in the book, she's 23. In the movie, they don't say her age, but he's no longer a resident. So generally, you would say he's established in his career. He's probably in his 30s. Lily has a childhood history of abuse from her father. Her father abused her mother in the movie. It's just her mother that gets abused. In the book, it's both.
Oh, okay.
And then she has a childhood love interest who was a boy experiencing homelessness who took up residence in the abandoned house behind her house. And that is her first love, who she sort of crassly refers to both in the book and the movie as her first time with anybody was with a homeless kid. And you're like, that's a weird way to say that.
Yeah.
Especially when you find out that they had this very complicated, loving relationship for teenagers. Anyway, fast forward to the future where she meets Ryle, a neurosurgeon who's very much a perfectionist, and she falls in love with him and gradually starts to experience abuse at his hands. They still get married and she finds herself pregnant. And I don't want to give away the end, but there you are.
Oh, we're going to be talking about the end.
Okay.
Where do you want to start? So
Well,
I have so many thoughts.
Let's start with the things that parents are going to want to shield their kids from.
All of it.
So the book, very much rated R. There's lots of F words. Like referring to having sex as the F word is pretty prevalent throughout the entire book. The descriptive scenes are much, much, much more descriptive in the book, especially the sex and the abuse scenes, both much more descriptive. I would say that the book is completely not for kids. You should completely shield the book from children. But when
children meaning like 18 and up.
I would say that over 18,
okay,
you could read the book. Under 18, I would leave it off, which is shocking because it's a very popular book with teenage girls.
Okay.
But when it comes to the movie, rated PG-13, what do you think?
What do I think? What do you mean? What do you
think parents would want to shield their kids from?
I mean, so again, my oldest is 9. He still watches Wildcrats, and then my middle is 8, and then my youngest, my daughter, is 4.5. So when I hear kid, that's like what I think. So when I'm like, I would shield my kids from every part of this movie. I would never let them see it. To me, this movie felt like a new version of Twilight or a not so bad version of 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay.
Right? Like so what is it about this movie that you need to show your kid in order for them to not be in an abusive relationship? I don't know. A lot of immodesty. There's pretty, like, as graphic as you can be in sex scenes in a PG-13 movie.
Yep.
Honestly makes you just kind of wonder why they made it PG-13. I'm not saying that I need it to be rated R so they show more, but like why? If the books are, why not make the movie R? I just don't think that it was very, very good. I would shield them from most of it.
Yeah. So when we have kids of different ages, and for the scope of the podcast, we're talking about anybody who may be theoretically living in your house under your roof.
Right.
So 18 and under, if you have an ability to influence that child, we're thinking about it. My oldest child is 16. My second oldest child is 14. So I have teenagers at this point who are interested in this type of movie. But when you say, like, when you're talking about sex scenes that are as graphic as they can be and still be PG-13, this means no breasts or booties are shown, but you do have like close-up kissing, close-up body pressing, lots of shoved against a wall wearing a slit up to your waist in your dress, and then a hand running up a thigh with fishnets, that kind of sex scenes. And then the abuse scenes are a little less descriptive in the movie than they are in the book. And we have a little bit of a concern there. So let's talk about shield-wise. I would say we would agree this is not appropriate for anybody younger than 16, right?
Yeah, let me ask you this real quick. So when it comes to shielding too. So like this is one of my issues with a lot of kind of rom-coms, including The Notebook and Walk to Remember, which are two of my favorite movies and books that I watched and read when I was in high school. I think that young people are so influenced by what they see in movies. And in this movie in particular, I'll just stick with this one. The guy, the main character, Ryle, is very good looking and he is very charming throughout the entire thing, but not charming in a way that you would like want your daughter to be charmed, right? Like I think you and I would agree we would not want our daughter to meet their future husband on a roof and like almost sleep with one another the first time they meet.
Yeah.
Not so even some of that part where it's like you could watch this as a young impressionable teenager and be like, ooh, like I want a neurosurgeon who admits that he hooks up with tons of women to pursue me. I worry about young girls especially being influenced by that, or guys being influenced to be that kind of a dude.
Yeah, when I read that scene in the book and then also watched it in the movie, because they're pretty similar, actually. He uses the F word instead of saying, I want to sleep with you. But it comes immediately after she tells him, my father died. I was at his funeral today. It was a traumatic experience for me. Okay, now you say something so I don't feel like a horrible person. And he says, I want to bleep you right now. And you're like, what? What kind of person are you monster? Like, that's just one of the things that's coming up on Instagram with regard to this thing where Ryan Reynolds interviewed the character who plays Atlas.
Who there's way less like scenes with, by the way.
Way less. Almost none.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, actually.
The child version, so it's not even the same actor.
Right.
There's all these people commenting on that. They're like, this is not a romantic comedy. Marketing for this movie is completely off because they're marketing it like a romantic comedy, but it's very much a domestic abuse movie.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about shepherding, the things that you want to talk to your kids about that they're never going to be able to avoid. So these are the topics that come up with why is this man approaching her this way when she's in this traumatic state?
Right.
Why is he treating her this way? But then the way that they address the domestic violence, you and I had very similar thoughts about it. Maybe you say the thing that you thought.
So throughout the in the movie, I haven't read the book, but in the movie, there's three main times total in the movie that he abuses her, and not even like emotionally. Like there are three times where he physically abuses her, almost 0 times where he emotionally abuses her. Arguably, maybe 1 or 2 during the physical, but like it's very weird to me that this serial abuser abuses her 3 times in the total of what 5 years. Like
I don't know how long that was supposed to be.
Some years, right? At least 1 full year.
Yeah.
In my experience with people who abuse, it is just not a stereotypical abuser. Like he's kind of a hero throughout the whole movie, except for those 3 moments, including he has multiple times where you would assume that an abuser would abuse and he doesn't, and respects her wishes when she's like, I want to wait until we're in a steady relationship.
Yeah.
So that was very weird. But in the movie, they show the first 2 times that he abuses her, they make it seem like an accident. It's very clearly trying to, like, once they finally show the actual version of what happened and towards the end, it's very clear they're trying to show you the mentality of someone being abused, how they might remember an event or why they would stay with an abuser, which I totally understand. The fact that they basically make you fall in love with this guy until the final moment of abuse. And then from that moment on, they continue to make you fall in love with this guy. He continues to be apologetic and very sincerely apologetic, and not like in a cyclical abusive situation. This isn't like the immediate I'm sorry. That happens, but this is like the months and months go by, I'm sorry. I too would leave myself. Like abusers don't say that. They don't let you leave freely the way that he does multiple times throughout this movie. So I don't think they did a good job of showing what abuse really is like and then highlighting the horribleness of it.
Yeah. This movie was marketed as a romance and the novel is in the romance section. This creates some really gross, muddy waters for me that I absolutely hate, especially when we've talked before about how I don't like sympathetic villains for children. Now we're talking about teenagers as opposed to children, but when you scale up from a villain who is trying to destroy the world to a villain who is your husband, though it's too muddy to involve a teenager here without having a huge amount of discussions. So you're almost looking at 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 sex and love scenes to abuse scenes.
Yeah.
Like we have seen so much of this guy being so charming and so kind and so sexy that literally when I left this theater, and by the way, the theater that I went to, there were 0 men in the movie, and it was almost, except for myself, exclusively what appeared to be mother-daughter pairs. So like a middle-aged woman and a teenager woman in her early 20s. One of the women behind me said, I don't understand why she left him. He wasn't even that bad. And I was like, you did not do this movie right.
Yeah.
Like, come on, girl. So the fact that they've muddied this water so terribly, I get it that they're trying to get into the head of somebody who's being abused. This is how they end up staying. This is why they do those things. I understand that, but I don't think that it's a great choice. And I certainly don't think it's a good idea to be putting your stories of domestic abuse in a romance setting.
Yeah.
I think it's irresponsible. So I don't, I'm sorry, Colleen Hoover fans, but a lot of her work is semi-pornographic in its readability, in its book format, but it often features themes of domestic violence. And I just don't think we should be doing that. It's very, like you said, 50 Shades of Grey, normalizing a sexual assault toward women.
Yeah.
OMG, who cares? Oh, women. I can't imagine how horrible your lives are. Get a hobby. Get a life. You're a white woman. You have no sex.
I'm a grown woman. These comments on Instagram do not bother me, but your kids shouldn't have to deal with this. That's where Bark comes in. Silence that noise. Bark can help you to cut off the apps, the scary language, and it'll let you know if any bullying like this is happening to your kid online. Get the Bark phone or the Bark app. You'll like it. When you're saying, why do we make this PG-13? Why not just make it an R-rated novel? I am now firmly of the belief that people are creating a pipeline to pornography addiction, that they're trying to make things that parents look at it and go, oh, PG-13, that means it's fine for you. So that you go and watch this and you're teenage turned on, and also this girl's getting abused, and you leave with the expression of, well, he wasn't that bad. Like, what? We really didn't go the right way with this.
Not only was he not that bad, but then at the not that bad, but at the very end, you find out that the reason he's like that is because he accidentally shot his brother when he was a kid. So you're almost making you're almost saying his abuse is a mental illness that he can't even control because he was little. It makes you like him even more. You're like, oh, well, like that happened. Yeah. Of course he's going to abuse. It's like, no, there's still no excuse. But also you don't have to have that be a part of it. It just makes no sense. I am with you that Hollywood seems to be doing this, but I don't think Blake Lively would do this. I don't think that I think she went into this movie wanting to make a movie to help people who struggle with domestic violence.
Yes, I do agree with that.
So do you think there's maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out what you're saying then. Do you think there's a chance that Hollywood is doing this and she thought she was doing something good?
I don't know, because the director is the guy who plays Ryle, and he has been in most of his press junket things coming out talking about domestic abuse, whereas everybody else that's going out, the guy who plays Atlas and Blake Lively, are kind of playing up the romantic aspects of it. And then Ryan Reynolds has actually been in some of the press things doing like funny jokes. He actually wrote that scene he rewrote it for the screenplay, the scene on the roof. It was written by Ryan Reynolds.
Wow.
So he's been in these press junkets kind of making it light and things like that. And some people on Instagram are like, what are you doing with, like, this is a domestic abuse story. So I don't know that they're even realizing that they're doing it. We talked a lot about this in the Quiet on Set thing, where they were making these things. And I don't think that producer guy from Nickelodeon necessarily was a bad guy. He was just pushing envelopes. He was giving the people what they want. And that's very much what this is. This Colleen Hoover book is extremely popular with teenage girls, which is why they had to make it PG-13, because teenage girls were reading it. Yep. I get it. Like, they're trying to give the people what they want. And I don't think Blake Lively is a villain. I think she did a great job portraying a person experiencing abuse and getting out of abuse.
Yeah.
I think that they've lost the script. They've lost the plot completely. Not like as in of this book, but of like the fact that storytelling matters and storytelling influences children or people. Two things that you said. You were talking about him being sympathetic because he had shot his brother. He had this traumatic experience. I can hear people already saying that's true of most abusers. Most abusers were abused.
Right.
Okay, great. I get that. And maybe you include that so that you have that angle so you can understand it. But I just don't feel like it was a clean enough, that doesn't matter. Right. We don't perpetuate that. I think that's what they were going for, but they left it completely with Blake Lively's character and didn't really, I don't know, you don't see him go into therapy or anything. Yeah,
like it ends up being a romantic movie, even at the end, where he walks away without any argument or fight after she names their daughter after him.
his
brother.
Yeah.
Like it was like a romantic ending with a dude who abused you.
Yeah.
Does not make any sense.
It would have been way better if he went to jail.
Yeah.
Way better. But and like when people leave romantic or abusive relationships, that's the most dangerous time. Like that's when you're most likely to be murdered. So it's wild that they were like, oh, just leave him. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like she needed to move in with someone. There needed to be someone with her.
And you're telling me he's not going to find out where that guy lives and ever show up and freak out?
Right.
No shot.
Yeah.
No shot. So I know, willing suspension of disbelief. I get it. It's a movie,
I know. But when we're talking about this section of the podcast, we're talking about what you need to shepherd your kids through. So these are concepts that people are going to talk about the redeeming qualities of this movie and that they come up with these concepts. So you want to kind of have this thought in your head when you're talking to your teenager about it, that these were not presented as well as they could have been. And when your teenager is about to start dating and they're reading this book, maybe this is where we need to push back against what we're serving up to our kids.
100%.
Right, so when we're talking about what you can share in, because this is the hottest movie of the fall, it's the hottest book of last year, whatever it was. What are we going to get to share in our kids with?
I will not be watching this movie with my kids, but if I were to share anything with them about it, I would just it's going to be, my parents were amazing. They did a great job with me. They never really sat me down and talked about abuse. And like, thank God my parents were not abusing each other ever. So like, maybe that didn't cross their mind.
Right.
But my parents never sat me down and talked about like, hey, women can abuse too. Make sure you never do it. It was just kind of like ingrained that like guys just never hit ladies, right? Mm-hmm. Ever. They would never do it for any reason. For me, I think it's going to be important as I'm raising my kids to talk to my daughter about how, of course, don't abuse, but also to like have a zero tolerance policy forever, and to make sure that I'm raising my boys to never even think about doing that.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about what not to do instead of telling people what to do. Let's model some healthy dating. Like, let's talk to our kids about dating. What does it look like to go on a date? One of the things I see with the teenage kids my daughter hangs out with is that they immediately become boyfriend and girlfriend. They haven't even been on a date yet, and this is her boyfriend. They're like, what does this mean? And then they've been together for 2 weeks talking on the phone and realize they don't even like each other. And now it's this whole torrid breakup, and he's gonna leak her nudes now, and you're like, why does he even have nudes? He's not even bought you dinner yet. This is wild.
Even then, don't send those.
Right, but like, why is this dude your boyfriend? He hasn't taken you on a date. We need to stop with the don't do this, don't do that, and start with the take her on a date. You pay for dinner. Actually
walk
say
her
it's
to
a
the
date.
door. Don't honk the horn.
If you are uncomfortable around a young man, you don't ghost him. You give him a reason why you would prefer not to continue dating him. Like, both ways, we can help our kids date better. And I think we've just decided to take a hands-off approach to it as parents and be like, well, whatever, you're dating now, I have no say in it, which is garbage. It's stupid. Just for a little aside, I thought it was great that Lily has a childhood love of gardening. And you see her with a garden as a young girl with Atlas in the garden. And I just thought, like, how cool when people have actual hobbies that aren't just looking at your phone.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was such a cool thing that you could talk to your kids about and be like, hey, look, she has an actual personality. Wouldn't it be wild if we had personalities other than I scroll Instagram?
My personality is that I smoke meat.
That is your personality. Mine is flowers and
watch
bread.
Football. Ooh, bread. I'm trying to get into sourdough.
Oh, I'll bring you one next time.
We'll do that together.
It's doing really well.
What age would you say is appropriate for this? I wrote 16 with a parent. If for some reason you want to see it, I probably would wait until you're 18 for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say whenever your kid is allowed to start dating. And I would say that if you don't have an age that your kid is allowed to start dating, you need to set one of those. Go ahead and set a date when your kid is allowed to start dating. It doesn't have to be the same from kid to kid.
2075.
I'm an age, but sure.
75.
Whatever age you're going to tell your kid they're allowed to start dating. So in my household, that's 16. They're allowed to start dating. So around then, I would think that the movie is appropriate. However, the book I would not recommend to anybody under the age of 18.
There you go.
There you go. Hey, this was kind of great, wasn't it?
It was awesome.
What if people really liked this content and wanted to have more of it?
They should go to isthisforkids.com where they can find links to everywhere that we are, especially YouTube and Instagram, where we interact with the community often.
All the time. We're responding to your comments down there. There's a lot of media out there for us to navigate as parents.
I'm Jonathan Beard of Blevins.
I'm Katie, MrsRuvi. Let us help you decide.
Is this for kids?